August 15th, 1943. I remember the title of that day like a scar. I was a Luftwaffe pilot who laughed at B-17s with 16 machine guns, until a single late flying fortress tore my swarm apart. In the briefing room at Lechfeld, with a map of Schweinfurt pinned like a wound to the wall, we laughed at that number as if laughter could armor us. The phrase, 16 machine guns, became a joke, a talisman that reduced a living machine into arithmetic, and I wore the joke like a uniform. The room smelled of coffee and leather and the cold certainty of orders. We ran through altitudes and rendezvous points, and someone joked about the bombers being overweight with defensive fire. The tactical display showed the 8th Air Force's route and the fragility of their fighter support. Still we joked. I, who had watched the regime's crimes from the edge of uniform and obedience, nodded along. It was easier that way. Pride and technical confidence braided into contempt. Contempt that would be the first wrong I gave that morning when I signed the order to close. At Lechfeld the younger pilots swaggered, the veterans calibrated fate into habits. The commander's slide spoke of combat boxes and engine-out procedures, of flak concentrations over Schweinfurt. We accepted the map's inevitability and the propaganda that reduced men to statistics. I told myself we fought for skill and survival, not for the state's monstrous aims, but the machine used my flights the same. I approved the attack profile with a steady hand. Unseen then was how the smallest miscalculation would let one battered bomber rewrite the sky. Before takeoff we joked again about the fortress and its mythic guns. The name, Flying Fortress, rolled off tongues like a dare. I thought of the Bf-109G's nimbleness, the way it climbed and rolled with the subtle vindictiveness of a trained animal, and I felt invincible. That invincibility was a thin, easy coat to wear. It blinded me to the discipline within those bombers, to the terrifying, patient cadence of men who would not break simply because numbers suggested they should. In the end, the laughter in that room was a bad prayer. It set the tempo for how we approached the day, fast, confident, trusting that machine and training would suffice. It made me give orders I would later count like confessions. The briefing's humor became the preface of a lesson written in fire across the skies of Franconia, a lesson about what happens when contempt replaces caution and how a single, late, damaged bomber could become a judge in the sky. August 15th, 1943, morning. The Bf-109G rolled like a loaded beast across cracked tarmac, vibration and heat thrumming through the cockpit. The smell of avgas bit at the back of my throat, a chemical tang that would later be braided to guilt. We lifted over fields of ripening wheat, the patchwork countryside shrinking beneath the sun as our swarm formed lines that were supposed to be thin, exact, lethal. On the radio came the clipped confirmation of bomber traffic crossing Franconia. The voice was a metronome of expectation. I smiled then, an expression as automatic as flipping the cockpit canopy, because the sky had always belonged to trained men and precise machines. We rose into the brittle clarity of late August air, the altitude swallowing the shapes of ground below. The 8th Air Force's bombers were visible as distant gray knots, arranged in combat boxes like a chain of floating fortresses. Their discipline made them look almost architectural, human lives locked into a formation that was half weaponry and half fragile hope. In the warmth of the climb, I felt my chest fill with that peculiar pilot's arrogance. We would pick the angles, claim the moments, collect the trophies of air combat. I still clung to that illusion. Formation flying quickly ate the little certainty I had. Radio traffic split into static and orders. Leers and jest in the squadron gave way to an attention sharpened by the smell of metal and the cold calculations of closure. Men checked guns, adjusted throttles, tuned their breathing to the rhythm of the engines. We were young, and the younger we were, the bolder we became. The swarm kept its intervals, but the space between machines was never a neutral thing. It was a living margin where chance could slide a blade. As we neared the bomber stream, the sun carved metallic edges around wings and fuselages. The combat boxes were already moving like a slow, purpose-built animal. I recall thinking the moment would be clean, approach from the tail, spike motor lines, collect the kill. That was the customary thinking, the comfortable doctrine. I did not yet understand how a single delay, a single damaged bomber left behind by its formation, could convert prescribed actions into fatal choreography. August 15th, 1943, approaching Schweinfurt. We found them in the mid-morning glare, rows of B-17s in rigid packs, silver bellies glinting, propellers slicing the air into geometry. The combat box, presented itself as a wall of metal and men. Approaching from the tail felt reassuring, a line of sight, a place where one could thread a single pass and withdraw. Old habits died hard. The tail run was what we knew. It offered comfort by familiarity even as it lashed us toward concentrated .50 cal fire. The first pass filled the cockpit with the acoustic texture of war. Tracer ribbons stitched the sky into lines that made the machine look like it bled light. The meteoric hits that struck plank and string had the grotesque intimacy of rain. I felt each bullet as a small, insulting shove against the fuselage, each impact a tally. A wingman's warning blinked on my instruments, debris in the slipstream, a wingtip burning in an orange smear. I watched men's faces in the canopy reflections, eyes set like pale, weathered coins. We traded speed for angle, and with each angle our margin for escape shrank. We had photographs and intelligence about the B-17s armament, and we had the arrogance of pilots trained to exploit weak points. But the fortress was more than parts. It was crewed by a lattice of practiced men who turned their defensive fire into choreography. As we closed in, the rhythm of their reply was cold, measured, and calibrated. This was not panicked shooting. It was the kind of disciplined volley you only see when crews understand their work down to the breath. When I pulled out after that first exchange, the air humming in my ears, the taste of cordite lingered like iron. Confidence had nicked but not bled away. I rationalized, we'd adapt the next pass. This rationalization was a seed of hubris. We had misjudged the fortress's capacity to apply sustained, organized defense from every angle, and we had not yet seen what a single, isolated bomber could do when it stopped being prey and began to fight as if its life depended on it, because it did. August 15, 1943, mid-morning. The radio filled with clipped commands and the ragged edge of breathless calls, but nothing in words conveys the way the sky suddenly became a place of pain. Engines climbed, rolled, and screamed. Tracers braided and then unbraided as men sought angles. The sensory assault was total, vibration through the pedals, the hollow metallic taste from hits, the canopy glass trembling as if the aircraft were being scored by a giant's fingernails. I had ordered the attack, and each second afterwards landed with a terrible weight. A wingman's aircraft folded like damaged paper and drifted away, one wing a ragged strip of metal. I watched the parachute bloom from that height as if it were a punctuation mark in the sentence of the fight, a small, sad white on the vast blue. The sight lodged like a stone behind my ribs. I felt the swarm's cohesion starting to unravel, the steady cadence of formation punctured by smoke, by the sudden absence of a man. This is the precise arithmetic of attrition. One ship out, one more angle exposed. Pushing on toward the bomber that lagged, we still believed discipline and technique would carry us. We dove and clawed for position, and the fortress answered with an almost surgical focus. The sheer volume of fire coalesced not into chaos but into an array of lethal arcs that found structure in the sky. My instruments vibrated warning. My hands tightened. The canopy reflected my eyes back to me, wide, hard, incredulous. The radio chatter turned sparse, then frantic, then a brittle silence where once there had been bravado. I felt the collision of my orders with consequence. I had pushed the swarm to close, and that decision now sat heavy and metallic in my mouth. The sky had become less an arena of heroics and more an indictment. Every burst I had authorized now felt like the pulling of a lever that set fate in motion for other men. The moral cost of command closed in, and there was no way to rehearse an apology. August 15, 1943, late morning. At the end of the bomber column, a solitary B-17 lagged, its fuselage smeared with oil and its left innermost engine coughing smoke. From a distance it looked like a wounded beast, solitary and doomed. Up close it was a crucible. We turned on it with the hunger of men tasked to prune and punish. The expectation was simple: finish the crippled machine and move on. We did not know that the wounded could fight with the concentrated fury of the cornered. As we circled, the delayed fortress moved not like a disabled husk, but with the precise adjustments of a captain's ship. Gun positions that had seemed inert flared to life in disciplined, overlapping arcs. The so-called backward bomber became a whirlwind of aimed metal, each defensive position calibrated to cover another, each burst conserving rather than wasting ammunition. It refused the script we had written for it. It did not panic, it organized. The sky reshaped around that single machine. Our swarm's intervals, once a safety margin, began to collapse under the pressure of accurate, sustained fire. Men I knew, pilots with steady hands and measured careers, were suddenly separated by smoke and silence. The fortress's waist guns carved lanes through our approach vectors, and the concentrated hits came with an almost human deliberation. The aircraft took on a singular personality, stubborn, resigned, and unbearably efficient. As we pressed, one by one our aircraft took hits that opened like wounds. We attempted pinches and feints, trying to pull the bomber into angles we favored, but each attempt was met with disciplined, overlapping fire. The isolated bomber had become, paradoxically, a fortress of resolve. I felt the entire choreography of the engagement bend against the will of that single machine, and with each second the blame for pressing closer grew heavier on my shoulders. I had ordered closeness. That order had turned into the axis on which the disaster would spin. The sky closed in, and the late bomber's fire stitched the air into a tapestry of death and noise. Men fell from the sky like torn pages. Instruments screamed. My hands smelled of oil and sweat. In the instant when a wing piece tore free and a colleague was consumed by flame, I understood the cruel arithmetic. My command had exposed them. The lagging flying fortress had not only survived, it had become the instrument that dissected our swarm. And the question that would haunt me was simple and intolerable. Why had we assumed our contempt would be enough? August 15th, 1943, approaching Schweinfurt. The radio from the flak batteries below crackled with names of factories: Kugelfischer, SKF, the rolling bearing works that kept our war machines alive. I heard them as coordinates of obsession. Schweinfurt was already beneath us, trembling under the parade of bombers, and all I could think was, I must destroy that crippled fortress before it releases its load. Duty wrapped itself in purpose. Purpose was only fear disguised as righteousness. The smoke from the crippled B-17's wounded engine spread into a gray trail that marked its path across the sky. It should have been an easy kill. Yet the closer I came, the more the air felt thick, resistant, alive with danger. My machine, the Bf-109G, shuddered as bullets struck the fuselage's skin, the metallic ringing spreading through the petals into my bones. The fortress turned, slowly but deliberately, showing its tail first, then shifting its angle like a boxer seeking leverage. It was not fleeing. It was luring us in. I could see the muzzle flashes before I heard the impacts. The .50 caliber fire was precise, not desperate, short, rhythmic bursts that crossed the air in lines of orange light. My gun sight danced with vibration as I tried to keep the target centered. I pressed the trigger for a short burst, tracers climbing toward the silver hull. Some struck, others ricocheted harmlessly off reinforced plating. The smell of cordite filled the cockpit again, sharp and bitter. I thought of the briefing room, of our laughter, and felt a coldness creep up my throat. Below, the city was already catching fire. Black columns rose from the factories like new towers, unnatural and silent from this altitude. In some corner of my mind, I knew that civilians were there, hiding, praying, coughing in basements while we traded thunder above them. But war does not grant space for empathy during combat. At that moment, all I could see was that single enemy plane, smoking, relentless, impossible to kill. The fortress dipped its left wing, crossing our formation's path. I followed, pushing the throttle forward until the vibrations blurred my vision. Bullets tore through the air so close that the pressure waves slapped the canopy like fists. A line of impacts crept along the right side of my fuselage, holes the size of coins, growing. My oxygen mask smelled faintly of hot rubber. I forced myself to stay on course, closing in to within 200 meters. I could see the dorsal turret moving, the glass bulb rotating smoothly, searching for me. The gunner found me first. The first burst struck near the radiator. The engine coughed, sputtered, then caught again. My teeth rattled with the sound. I pulled back, feeling the control stick fight against me. The Bf-109 bucked like an animal refusing the whip. The fortress passed across my nose, its belly visible for an instant, blackened with soot. In that moment I realized what made it terrifying. Not its firepower, not its armor, but the will of the men inside. Unseen faces who kept fighting with mechanical precision, even as death followed in their slipstream. "Schweinfurt ahead!" someone shouted through the static. The voice was almost a ghost. I glanced at the fuel gauge. We had been at this for less than 15 minutes, yet it felt like hours. Below us, explosions walked across the city in steady rhythm, bombs away. The factories were being erased even as we failed to stop a single straggler. I clenched my jaw, forced the throttle forward again, and lined up for another attack run. The sky was a madhouse of smoke and sunlight. The fortress rolled slightly, adjusting, giving me the illusion of weakness. I fired, short bursts, disciplined, but too late. The answering fire from its tail tore through the space where I'd been a second earlier, and when I pulled up, I saw the flicker of another explosion behind me. One of ours had gone down. No parachute. My hands trembled on the controls. I knew then that this was not a duel. It was an execution of arrogance. That single delayed bomber was dismantling my squadron, one pass at a time, as if avenging all the laughter we had poured into those briefings. And still, I refused to break off. Because if I turned away, if I admitted defeat to one wounded fortress, then every reason I'd told myself for flying, pride, duty, survival, would collapse with it. I dove once more, heart pounding like the engine itself, determined to finish what I had begun. The guns of the fortress turned toward me like eyes. August 15th, 1943, midday. Meyer was the first to vanish. One moment, his Bf-109 rode my wing like a shadow. The next, it was swallowed by light. A burst of orange fire bloomed where his canopy had been. For an instant, I saw his aircraft split, not explode, just open, like something being peeled apart by invisible claws. The sound reached me seconds later, a muffled thump through the air. His voice never returned on the radio. I rolled left, instinct and guilt moving faster than reason. Through the smoke, a flash of white appeared, his parachute, half inflated, twisting in the turbulence. It spun violently, dragged sideways by the wind from the bomber's passage. I wanted to call his name, but the radio was already a chaos of static, panic, and terse commands. Someone screamed coordinates. Someone else just breathed into the mic. Then, silence. The fortress was still there, steady, stubborn, alive. It flew as if it owned the air, each gun station firing with mechanical calm. The waist guns sent their tracers in perfectly timed rhythm, while the tail turret pivoted like a living thing, tracking us, anticipating. I felt my heartbeat sink with the tempo of their fire. They weren't flailing, they were conducting. We had learned in training that the B-17 was designed for mutual defense. Alone, it should have been weaker. That assumption was the lie killing us now. This single, isolated bomber was not weaker, it was liberated. Without formation restrictions, it maneuvered just enough to ruin every approach vector we tried. It kept its back to the sun, forcing our eyes to squint against the glare, its silhouette an unyielding black crucifix in the light. I ordered a pincer movement, textbook, precise, confident. I had to sound calm on the radio. "We close from both sides," I said, my voice thinner than I intended. Lens confirmed, rotor 2. 3 aircraft left besides mine. We began our dive. The B-17 responded immediately, turning into us with a slow, deliberate bank, offering its flank as bait. It was a trick, a masterful one. Rotor took it. He went in first, his burst short and clean, the kind that usually tore through aluminum like paper. For a moment, I thought he had done it. Then the waist gun opened up, and his right wing tore free in a spray of fuel and smoke. The explosion was quiet from my cockpit, distant, like thunder behind glass. Debris peppered my canopy. One piece struck the spinner, leaving a dent that made the propeller hum unevenly. Rotor's plane disintegrated into fragments that spiraled downward, each catching the sunlight like falling knives. No shoot this time. Just silence again. I wanted to break off, to call for a retreat, but the thought froze in my throat. I had led them into this, the laughter, the arrogance, the blind confidence. Turning back now would mean admitting that the fault was mine, not the fortress's. So I dove again. The world narrowed to the crosshair. The bomber filled the sight picture, smoke curling from its left wing. I squeezed the trigger. The guns chattered, vibration numbing my hands. Tracers stitched up its fuselage. I saw fragments fly, panels tear, a burst of red mist behind one window. A hit, but not enough. The fortress did not slow. Then the return fire came, savage and exact. Bullets slashed through the air, punching holes in my left wing. The canopy shuddered. One round struck near the cowling, the sound like a hammer on iron. My cockpit filled with the stench of burning insulation. I jerked the stick, barely keeping level. Somewhere behind me, Lenz shouted something incoherent, maybe a warning, maybe a prayer, and the sky flared again with gunfire. I saw his 109 roll violently, trailing flame, but he stayed aloft. The fortress kept coming, straight as a spear through the chaos. I realized then that it wasn't luck or armor keeping it alive. It was discipline, the same discipline our training manuals preached but our pride ignored. Inside that bomber, 10 men moved as one mind. Inside my swarm, I had created only fear. I circled once, breathing hard, the sweat stinging my eyes. 3 of us remained. The fortress still burned, still fought. I heard the voice of our ground controller in my headset, urging us to disengage before fuel ran low. I didn't answer. Instead, I fixed my gaze on the crippled bomber, that solitary, defiant machine carving its way toward Schweinfurt. My hands were trembling, but my resolve wasn't gone. I whispered, barely audibly, again. The fortress steadied itself in front of me, smoke trailing like a banner. My throttle pushed forward. Whatever came next, I would meet it head-on. August 15th, 1943, over Franconia. We used to joke that the Americans had 16 guns per plane. The phrase had become a kind of charm, proof that we could not take them seriously. It was a lie, of course. I knew the B-17 had fewer than that, but propaganda didn't care for precision. It demanded laughter, not truth. And laughter was easier than fear. Now, watching that lone flying fortress tear through the sky like a wounded beast that refused to die, the joke tasted like ashes in my mouth. I leveled out beside Lenz. His 109 shuddered with damage, one wing peppered with holes, paint stripped by near misses. He gave me a quick nod through the canopy, 2 fingers raised, attack together. I returned the gesture. Our machines danced at the edge of the bomber's field of fire, searching for a window, a weakness. There were none. Every angle was covered. Every approach invited death. The fortress rolled slightly, opening its belly guns toward us. I felt the tension in my shoulders tighten until it hurt. I could hear my own breathing through the oxygen mask, mechanical, hollow, inhuman. My fingers were slick on the control stick. The sun flashed off the bomber's fuselage, and for a moment it looked like it was burning from within. Smoke still trailed from one engine, but it refused to stop spinning. I caught myself thinking about the men inside, about what it meant to stay and fight in that flying coffin. Were they frightened, or were they just as bound to orders as I was? Did they hate us, or simply endure us? I wondered if their gunner, the one who had shredded Meyer and Roeder, had a name he'd never see written again. I shook the thought away. Reflection was a luxury we couldn't afford. I switched my radio frequency to address the remaining 2 in my swarm. Form on me. High approach, staggered fire. We finish this. My voice didn't sound like mine. It was clipped, cold, almost bureaucratic. We climbed above the fortress, sunlight cutting sharp lines across our wings. The sky was thin here, bright, unforgiving, a place for machines, not men. Below, the bomber held steady, its tail drifting smoke like a comet. I rolled over and dove, nose down, feeling the air compress around me, the controls grow stiff. The world narrowed to a single black cross in the gun sight. I fired in short bursts, 2 seconds, maybe 3. Tracers reached for the bomber and vanished against its hide. I adjusted, fired again. This time, sparks bloomed across the wing root. A good hit. But the return fire came faster than thought. Bullets lashed upward, a storm of light that found my right wing and the radiator. Warning lights flashed red across my panel. Lenz dove in from the other side, his guns flaring. His tracers stitched across the nose of the fortress, shattering glass near the bombardier's window. For a moment, I saw a figure flinch inside, a shadow moving behind the cracked canopy. Then the upper turret found him. The fortress's twin Brownings spat in perfect rhythm, and Lenz's aircraft took the rounds along the fuselage. His dive turned into a wobble, then a fall. I watched him disappear into a spiral of smoke, his voice half a scream, half static over the radio. No shoot. Just another name erased by discipline and metal. My stomach turned. 3 gone. I was the last. The sky had become empty except for me and that burning fortress, an exchange of souls above a dying city. I could still see the bomb bay doors open below, see the black eggs tumble toward the factories. Schweinfurt's death was already sealed. I thought of the Reich I served, of the flag painted on my wing, of the voices that told us we were saving Europe by destroying it. I had joined the Luftwaffe for flight, for speed, for sky, not for the rot beneath the banners. But every burst of my guns was a signature on their crimes. I was part of the machine, and machines do not choose their morality. The fortress banked again, graceful despite its wounds. It was defiance incarnate, a symbol of endurance that no propaganda could erase. For the first time that day, I felt no hatred for the men inside it. Only respect and shame. Still, I turned back for another pass. I had no choice left but to keep flying. August 15, 1943, over Schweinfurt airspace. The decision to use the Wurfgranit 21 rockets was desperate, but desperation had already become the air we breathed. I gave the order flatly, "Arm the WGR-21s." My voice cracked in my headset. The command meant abandoning finesse for brute terror, each rocket a slow, heavy projectile meant to scatter bomber formations, not duel with a single opponent. But the fortress had shredded every tactic we knew. Now, I would use fire itself. Below us, Schweinfurt burned. The city was a geometry of rising black smoke and fireballs punching through factory roofs. The flak batteries still barked, but their targets had long since passed. What remained in the sky was that solitary, smoldering B-17, the latecomer that had become our executioner. Lenz was gone. Roeder, Meyer, all gone. Only I remained. My Bf-109 vibrated like an overstrung violin, the engine coughing black soot with each climb. I looked out toward the fortress and saw the sunlight flash across its fuselage, silver and black where fire had licked the paint away. It should have been dying. Yet it was still flying, steady, deliberate, every gun watching, every barrel ready. I armed the rockets. 2 long tubes slung under my wings, each one as heavy as my conscience. They were inaccurate, crude, the Luftwaffe's answer to massed bombers. Fire one, and the recoil could throw the aircraft sideways. Hit nothing, and you still might die in your own turbulence. But I had nothing else left. "Target acquired," I whispered, though there was no one left to hear me. I climbed to 2,000 meters above the fortress, aligning to attack from the front quarter. The bomber's silhouette grew in my gun sight, a shape of defiance. I felt the engine strain, the propeller cutting air that fought back. The sky was trembling. No, I was. My fingers hovered over the trigger switch. Then, I fired. The rockets leapt from the rails with a roar that drowned every other sound. White smoke streamed behind them as they arced downward, the trajectory slow and unnatural. I counted seconds, 1, 2, 3, until they detonated in twin blossoms of black smoke. The concussion rattled my cockpit, pressing against my chest. For a brief, exhilarating moment, the fortress disappeared behind a curtain of smoke. I banked hard, coming around to see. The air was turbulent, shards of debris tumbled like confetti. I thought I'd done it, that finally, the monster was falling. But then, through the haze, came the shape again, emerging like a ghost through fire. The B-17 was wounded, yes, but still airborne. Its right wing burned faintly near the nacelle, its skin torn and blackened, yet its gun still moved, alive. The dorsal turret tracked me immediately, calm, efficient. It fired once, twice, tracers cutting the air around my canopy. I dove through the smoke, the instruments shaking, alarms blinking red. My rocket launchers were empty now. All I had left were my cannons and the fading hope that the next burst would matter. I came in low, beneath its tail, climbing through the turbulence of its slipstream. The air felt alive, charged with static and smoke. I squeezed the trigger, cannon shells thudded, tracers climbed. I saw hits pepper its fuselage, chunks of aluminum flying free. But again, it refused to fall. In that chaos, time began to dissolve. I could no longer tell if seconds or minutes passed. My heartbeat, the gunfire, the roar of the engine, all of it merged into one single mechanical rhythm. I had become part of the machine I hated. The smell of gunpowder mixed with sweat and oil filled my mask. My hands trembled on the stick. I was no longer flying to win, only to end it. The fortress had become a mirror of everything we were, wounded, burning, still killing to survive. I pulled up sharply, feeling the G-force crush my chest. Below me, the B-17 banked left, trailing a deeper column of smoke. The rockets had hurt it, but not broken it. And as I leveled out, gasping, I realized something chilling. It wasn't trying to escape anymore. It was turning toward me. Its nose rose slowly, deliberately, and the glint of its forward guns flashed in the sunlight. I had awakened the beast I thought I could bury under fire. The fortress was coming for me. August 15th, 1943, over Schweinfurt's burning horizon. I tried to meet the fortress head-on, a maneuver I had always dismissed as suicidal. But at that point, logic had no place in the cockpit. The idea was simple. If the rockets hadn't broken it, perhaps a frontal pass would. 12 o'clock attack, we called it, the deadliest dance two aircraft could share. The sun was behind me now, the air shimmering with heat and the stench of smoke. I pulled the nose up, aiming directly at the B-17's shadowed front. The glass nose of the fortress glinted like an eye, reflecting both fire and sky. Inside that dome, shapes moved, human silhouettes behind cracked glass, one hunched over the Norden bomb site, another manning the twin Brownings that guarded the front like fangs. The closer I came, the more the air itself seemed to scream. At 500 meters, I could see the muzzle flashes from the chin turret, white sparks in rhythmic bursts. Their tracers sliced toward me like measured handwriting in light. I squeezed the trigger and returned fire, my MG-151 cannons roaring in violent response. The smell of cordite filled the cockpit, the recoil shivered through my arms. My rounds climbed into the bomber's nose, shattering glass. I saw a flash of red behind the impact. The bombardier hit, or maybe just spattered oil, and for a fraction of a second I thought I had broken through. But the next volley from their guns came without pause, cold and exact. The cockpit erupted with noise and vibration. A slug punched through the cowling, another through the left radiator. Hot glycol sprayed across my windshield, streaking it in milky arcs. The temperature gauge spiked. The engine began to cough, each cycle sounding heavier, slower. The propeller blurred into distortion. I felt the controls stiffen. The Bf-109 fought to keep level. The smell of burning oil filled the air, thick, suffocating, metallic. The oxygen mask couldn't keep it out. I tasted it, bitter and alive. At 300 meters, I rolled to the side, avoiding the next burst that chewed through the air where I had been a heartbeat earlier. The fortress passed just above, close enough for me to see faces through the cockpit, brief, human flickers behind glass and smoke. I saw one of them turn his head toward me. He wasn't a monster or a machine. Just a man, doing his job, probably as scared as I was. For a moment, I nearly broke off. Nearly. But the engine's failing rhythm became a pulse of anger inside my chest. I pushed the throttle forward, trying to coax one more climb from the dying machine. The sky tilted. Warning lights blinked red. I leveled out beneath the bomber again, the world smeared with haze. The fortress continued its steady march toward Schweinfurt, one engine ablaze, its belly doors still open from the bombing run. I followed, limping, wounded, deafened by the roar of my own failing engine. The smell of hot oil thickened until it burned my eyes. Then, through the cracked glass of my canopy, I saw my own reflection, pale, wide-eyed, trembling, and for the first time since takeoff, I understood that I was not chasing victory anymore. I was chasing guilt. August 15th, 1943, above the smoke of Schweinfurt. The engine's tone changed, not the rhythmic hum of flight, but a ragged, dying cough that made the entire airframe vibrate. I knew the sound too well. It was the heartbeat of a machine preparing to quit. The radiator was hit, the coolant bleeding out into the slipstream, steam curling around the canopy. I had minutes, maybe less. That was when I saw it again, the small photograph taped to the panel beside the throttle. My sister and her newborn son, a picture she had sent 2 weeks before, when letters still reached us. Her handwriting on the back, "Come home safe, but come home whole." I had laughed when I read it. No one came home whole anymore. The image caught the sunlight, flickering like a candle against the dark metal of the cockpit. For a moment, I forgot about the fortress, about the burning city below, about the smell of fuel and cordite that filled my lungs. The baby's face was turned toward the camera, Innocent, unknowing, and I felt something cold open in my chest. What would he be told if I didn't return? That his uncle had died for the Reich? For honor? For nothing? The fortress loomed ahead, a black silhouette against the burning clouds. I could still see it clearly through the damage, the slow, determined climb, one engine spewing fire. It looked less like a machine now and more like a wounded creature, bleeding light and smoke, but still moving. I hated it. I admired it. And I feared it. I tightened my grip on the stick, my hands slick with sweat and blood. The edges of my vision were tunneling, the world shrinking to the sound of the propeller tearing through air. I should have turned back. I should have landed. But shame was a heavier weight than the aircraft itself. I had led my men to their deaths. I could not land while that thing still flew. I climbed again, the 109 shuddering violently, the gauges flickering like candle flames in a draft. Each vibration threatened to rip the wings off. I pulled level with the fortress, far enough to see the cracks along its glass nose, the holes in its fuselage, the flicker of fire near the bomb bay. Through the damaged turret, I could see movement, a man reloading, calm, unhurried, like it was just another drill. The smell of hot oil filled the cockpit again, choking, thick. I reached up to wipe the sweat from my eyes and felt the photograph brush against my wrist. It trembled with the vibrations. My sister's smile was half obscured by soot. I thought of her voice, soft, saying my name the way she had before the war. Before all of this. Below, the city roared. Explosions rolled across Schweinfurt like thunder. I knew what those bombs meant. Families, workers, children crushed beneath the machinery of my own side's making. The regime that had built this war was burning its own reflection below us. The fortress began to bank, turning for home. My fuel was nearly gone. My engine would not survive the trip back. Still, I eased the throttle forward. The photograph shook loose, fluttered once, and fell to the floor. I didn't pick it up. I only looked ahead, at the wounded bomber, at the sky full of ash, and felt the terrible pull of duty twist into something darker, a need for absolution through destruction. If I couldn't return home whole, then at least I would not return empty. August 15th, 1943, west of Schweinfurt. Close in. Closer. The words escaped before I even knew I'd spoken them. My voice, hoarse from smoke and fear, cracked over the radio. I wanted discipline, coordination, but what I gave them was suicide. Only two remained in the swarm now. Lenz and I, the remnants of what had once been four clean, confident aircraft. The sky was filled with the residue of our arrogance, smoke trails, falling debris, and the echoes of men who no longer answered. We regrouped on the bomber's right quarter. It was losing altitude, one engine gone, another flickering, the rest still strong. I could almost taste victory through the burning oil. The fortress turned gently, almost lazily, offering its flank. It looked vulnerable. Too vulnerable. Fetch 'em! Fetch 'em! I ordered again, pulling the formation tighter, the two of us now barely 50 meters apart, a fatal interval. The instinct of survival screamed in my skull, but pride was louder. We were predators, or so we thought. The fortress rolled to meet us, a deliberate, perfect maneuver. Its gunners waited until we were close enough that retreat was no longer possible. Then, the sky came alive. The waist guns opened first, twin streams of white tracers cutting across Lenz's fuselage. The dorsal turret followed, and the combined fire looked like a single glowing thread being sewn through the air. Lenz's 109 took the hits full on. I saw his right wing shear away with a puff of smoke, the aircraft instantly flipping into a flat spin. The canopy blew off. For a heartbeat, I saw his head snap back, and then he was gone, swallowed by fire. 3 men, 3 mistakes, and all of them bore my signature. The fortress didn't gloat, it simply kept flying, its engines howling like the breath of something ancient and patient. I pulled hard on the stick, feeling the 109 lurch, almost stall. The radio was silent now, nothing but the hiss of static. I realized that I was completely alone, surrounded by the smoke of my own decisions. The Luftwaffe manual had warned us never to close too tightly, never to crowd the sky. And yet I had done exactly that, driven by the illusion of control. The fortress had seen the opening I created, and it took it with machine-like precision. As I circled above the burning fields, I could still see the bomber below, limping westward but alive. It had destroyed my Schwarm, not through luck or power, but through patience. And I had handed it everything it needed. August 15th, 1943, over the fields west of Schweinfurt. The sky was bleeding. Thin black ribbons of smoke twisted upward from the wreckage of Lenz's aircraft, rising toward the burning clouds. I could still see the last flicker of flame where he'd gone down, a small orange wound on the green patchwork of farmland below. The wind carried the smell of burned fuel even up here, sharp and nauseating. I leveled my 109 and searched the chaos. Only the fortress remained, damaged, limping, yet unbroken. One engine trailed smoke, another sputtered, but it kept its altitude with grim determination. Every few seconds, its guns flared, searching for enemies that no longer existed. I realized it didn't know I was the last one. Or perhaps it did, and simply didn't care. I throttled forward, closing the distance until the massive shape filled my canopy. My cannon shells tore into its right wing, shattering panels, sending shards spinning into the slipstream. One engine coughed and belched black smoke. I saw the propeller stop mid-spin. For a moment, the fortress dipped. My heart leapt. This is it. But then it steadied, climbing again, impossibly. From the tail, a line of tracers erupted, precise, deliberate. They passed so close I could feel the concussion through the airframe. One round struck my right wing root, another tore through the fuselage behind me. The plane shuddered violently, the controls stiffening in my hands. I dove beneath the bomber's tail, trying to escape the gun arcs, but it was like fighting gravity itself. The air was alive with metal and fire. The noise was deafening, a mechanical scream that drowned out everything else. I could hear my heartbeat only as a dull echo inside my skull. The fortress began to turn toward me. Slowly, inevitably. Its nose dipped, and its forward guns flashed. Tracers ripped through the air like glowing needles. I jerked the stick left, but not fast enough. The rounds hit my cowling, punching holes that smoked and hissed. The aircraft's frame groaned, and I smelled the bitter tang of hydraulic fluid spraying from a severed line. I wanted to believe I still had control, but the 109 had other ideas. It pitched upward, then sideways, the horizon spinning. I caught one last glimpse of the bomber above me, black smoke trailing, wings scarred, yet flying as if guided by something greater than metal. I leveled out, gasping, shaking, staring after it. The fortress was still there, burning a slow path across the sky toward the west, a trail of fire marking not just its journey, but everything I had lost trying to bring it down. August 15th, 1943, late afternoon. Below me, Schweinfurt was disappearing under a moving fog of smoke and dust. The factories were gone, replaced by fire and ruin. Columns of black reached upward like twisted monuments, marking where thousands of bearings and lives had just been turned to ash. Through the haze, I could see flashes of light, bombs still detonating, roofs collapsing, streets glowing like molten veins. I had failed. We all had. The fortress, the one I couldn't kill, had done its work. And as it limped westward, I followed it with my eyes, no longer as an enemy but as a witness. It was a single wounded survivor of 1,000 others, yet it had brought my entire swarm to ruin. The radio crackled faintly with fragments of German ground control, coordinates, loss reports, static. I didn't answer. What could I say? That arrogance had cost 4 men their lives? That I had underestimated a single aircraft and, in doing so, watched my comrades burn for it? The air smelled of smoke and death, not just of fuel, but of something deeper. The city below wasn't just a target, it was proof of the lie we lived. I had told myself I flew for honor, for defense, for Germany. But the truth was plain now. I flew for a regime that built death as industry and called it glory. Through the thinning haze, I caught one final glimpse of the B-17's shadow disappearing into the western light. I felt no hatred then, only envy. Those men were flying home. I was still trapped above the wreckage of everything I had believed in. The war would go on. But part of me ended there, above Schweinfurt, following the trail of a single fortress that had destroyed far more than planes. August 15th, 1943, dusk. The controls froze. One moment I was chasing the fortress's fading trail, and the next, The 109 snapped hard to the left. The nose dropped. The world began to spin. The horizon tumbled over itself, earth, sky, smoke, sky again. The G-force crushed my chest. My vision narrowed to a dim circle. The engine screamed like an animal dying, coughing oil onto the windshield. I fought the stick, my muscles burning, the air howling through bullet holes in the fuselage. The smell of gasoline filled the cockpit, sharp, nauseating. My mask rasped with every breath. I tried to level, but the aircraft refused. It wanted to fall. In the corner of my eye, the photograph on the floor slid between my boots, trembling with emotion. At the last second, instinct took over. I cut the throttle, kicked the rudder opposite the spin, and yanked back. The aircraft jerked violently, and then, silence. The spin broke. The 109 leveled out, skimming barely above the fields. My heart hammered in my throat. Through the trembling canopy, I saw the distant trail of the fortress disappearing into the setting sun, one final streak of black smoke against gold light. It was leaving, and I was still alive. August 15th, 1943, evening. Lechfeld appeared through the haze like a ghost. The airfield was quiet, no chatter on the radio, no movement on the ground, just the low hum of distant engines fading into dusk. My 109 touched down hard, tires screaming, the landing gear groaning beneath the weight of a machine that had barely survived. The propeller sputtered once, then died. Silence took its place. Ground crew ran toward me, their faces pale and wordless. I climbed out slowly, my legs trembling, hands black with oil and sweat. Around us, empty spaces marked where my comrades should have parked. For planes had taken off that morning. Only one returned. Someone handed me water. I didn't drink. My reflection stared back from the hangar's metal skin, hollow eyes, a face gray with soot, streaked by the wind. No one asked what had happened. They didn't need to. The truth was written on the empty runway. Inside the briefing room, the map of Schweinfurt still hung on the wall. I traced the line we had flown with my finger, from Lechfeld to death and back again. The laughter from that morning echoed faintly in my mind. Now, there was nothing left to laugh about. August 15th, 1943. Night. The barracks were silent when I returned. The walls still smelled of oil and tobacco, but the laughter, the arrogance that had filled this place only hours before, was gone. I sat at my desk beneath the dim yellow bulb, the sound of distant engines fading into memory. My hands still trembled as I opened my flight log. The ink bled slightly on the page. I wrote, "They call it the Flying Fortress." The words looked small, powerless. I paused, then continued. Today, one alone destroyed my swarm. I forced myself to list the names: Meyer, Roeder, Lenz, each followed by a single line: missing, presumed killed. My handwriting wavered. I added a fourth: Kohler, though we had lost him earlier, his death now part of the same sin. When I finished, the page was wet where my hand had rested. I added one final note beneath their names. I laughed. I ordered the attack. I brought death with me. The words came heavier now, slower, honest. For months, I had told myself that flying was separate from politics, that the sky was pure, untouched by the rot on the ground. But Schweinfurt had stripped that lie away. The smoke I'd seen below wasn't victory, it was complicity. Before closing the notebook, I wrote what I had never dared to say aloud: flying well does not absolve serving evil. The Reich is a crime, and I am part of it. Outside, the night was quiet. No engines. No searchlights. Only the low whisper of wind across the empty tarmac. I looked once more at the photograph of my sister and her child, faces from a world that still believed in decency, and whispered a promise to the dark: never again will I serve a lie, no matter how high it flies.